How to move more for your mental health. Just one of the questions that we're going to be answering today on the next half an hour or so during this webinar. And if we're just meeting for the first time, my name's Matt Balfour. I am a wellbeing content creator, facilitator, and proud founder of a company called Let's Go Wellbeing. We help organizations to create more engaged, healthier workforces with a reduced cost of absence. Primarily, that's done through the delivery of things like mental health first aid, alongside various wellbeing and inclusion workshops, everything from neurodiversity to menopause, resilience. And today's subject, which is as we observe and celebrate Mental Health Awareness Week 2024, how to move more for your mental health. So why are we talking about this today? Well, let's start off and let me share a slide deck. Also, please, while the stream's just loading and everybody's getting settled in, please let me know in the comments section if you can kind of hear and see me okay. If I don't hear or see anything in the comments, I'm going to assume that you can, which is great. And yeah, please just get ready to lean in, take notes, and get value from this stream, wherever you're watching from. So let me just share this slide. What are we talking about this week? And yes, we're talking about it because it's an opportunity for us to discuss aspects of mental health, both inside of the workplace, with a view to prevent from becoming a problem. So move more for your mental health is the theme for Mental Health Awareness Week this year, which obviously takes place this week. That is between the 13th and 19th of May. And I think that's important. I think it's important that we're focusing on movement and mental health because anecdotally, I think most of us can kind of relate to there being an intrinsic link between our physical well-being and our mental health. You may have experienced it as something like runner's high, or that sense of euphoria at the end of a yoga practice, or even that sensation that all of your problems have seemingly disappeared when you take a walk in nature. And so if you've ever wondered how it all works and specifically what you can do to extract the same benefit for your mental health, then you're in the right place. Because during this presentation, during this webinar, during this live stream, I'm going to be breaking down the role of hormones alongside the clinical evidence that supports why you should move more for your mental health. And I'm going to be doing that by answering three very specific questions. So those questions are as follows. How does your body adapt to stress and the role of hormones within that? And also specifically, what types of exercise prevent mental health from becoming a problem? There's a systematic review that I'm going to be talking through with you a bit later on. And then lastly, we're going to be talking about how changing something as simple as changing the way that we breathe can help us to reduce stress and heal trauma, alongside the benefits of being aware of heart rate variability and how to improve it. Lastly, I've got 12 quickfire tips to help you integrate some of these tips so that you can move more for your mental health. But firstly, why is this important? Why is moving more for your mental health important? And what is the impact on the workplace? I guess the state of play with mental health at the moment. If you were live and joined us for the previous live stream where we spoke about Stress Awareness Month, which was in April, then you'll be aware that 63% of respondents to the CIPD's latest Health and Wellbeing at Work survey said that poor mental health was the leading cause of long-term sickness absence lasting 4 weeks or longer. So that's as of September 2023. The other side to that one as well is that according to the Health and Safety Executive's information based on self-reported data from the Labour Force Survey, we lose 17.1 million working days every year due to stress, depression, and anxiety, which in and of itself accounts for 54% of all working days lost due to poor mental health. So, needless to say, it has a significant impact on the workplace. And so, in terms of why we should move more for our mental health, I think it's important to, I guess, understand what's going on with how our body adapts to stress, okay, first and foremost. And to do that, I would like to take a moment to explain the role of hormones. So we'll be aware that hormones play a massive role in our well-being, everything from our sleep-wake cycle, or our circadian rhythm, as it's known, to going through the menopause, to our mood in general, right? And there's kind of two sides to it with hormones that affect our mood. We have feel-good hormones, as you can see here, everything from something like endorphins that help to alleviate pain, lower stress, and improve our mood. Serotonin, which aids sleep, digestion, wound healing, and bone health, and also dopamine, which is associated with pleasure, satisfaction, and also motivation. And lastly, oxytocin, which is associated with sexual arousal, recognition, trust, and romantic attachment. So, alongside the kind of good hormones, let's say, we also have some hormones that help us with coping in stressful situations. They include the likes of adrenaline, cortisol, and norepinephrine. And they work by increasing our blood sugar and heart rate in preparation for fight or flight. So they increase our blood sugar and heart rate to basically help the body mobilize its resources in preparation for fight or flight, to rise to the challenge and take on what's ahead, right? So all of this is controlled by a complex network of glands known as the endocrine system. And that helps us maintain something called homeostasis, which is essentially the body's way of maintaining an internal balance while navigating challenges of everyday life. So homeostasis is definitely where we want to be in terms of that internal balance. How we get there and how that process is managed is done by something called allostatic load, okay? Or AlEstasis actually is what it's called. So AlEstasis, and this model kind of explains it. AlEstasis is the process used to regulate our internal environment via gradual adaptations to stress, okay? So different sources of stress come into our lives on a daily basis. That can include chronic sources of stress, environmental stress. Let's say we had to move house. Chronic stress could be like a persistent, like a morbidity, for example, such as diabetes or a chronic illness. We have emotional stress, which could be to do with interpersonal relationships, either at work, at home, or beyond. Physical stress, which could be like a headache or a broken arm, for example, and acute sources of stress, such as maybe you've been made redundant or you're going through a divorce, etc. Redundant, avoid, divorce. There was another one I was thinking of, but redundancy or divorce will serve as a use case for what I'm trying to say here. So there are different sources of stress that we are faced with on a daily basis. And in the short term, allostasis brings with it, the process of allostasis brings with it useful psychological and behavioral adaptations to the changing environment, okay? So in the workplace, you might refer to this as resilience. However, as we move along the model just here, you'll see that allostatic load induced by chronic exposure to stressful stimuli or unhelpful coping strategies results in a disruption to our ability to adapt to stress. In other words, we become more vulnerable to changes in our environment, and our body's ability to maintain homeostasis, maintain that internal balance, is diminished, leaving us more susceptible to diseases, as you can see at the end just there, diseases that affect, our cardiovascular health and also our autoimmune system. So things like high blood pressure or hypertension, heart disease, obesity, diabetes, and also arthritis, as well as changes in mood, emotion, and thoughts that affect our behavior, also known as poor mental health. So I also just wanted to explain what I meant there by unhelpful coping strategies, because it's one thing to have a persistent exposure to different sources of stress, as I mentioned just there, be this acute, environmental, emotional, or whatever it might be. But it's the unhelpful coping strategies that I think definitely everybody could do with being a bit more discerning about and being aware of. So when I say unhelpful coping strategies, those of you that have done mental health first aid with me or elsewhere will be familiar with the concept of the stress container. And basically, you've got coping strategies that some of them seem like they are a good idea in the moment, but actually in the long run, they end up making things a hell of a lot worse and basically filling up your stress container and making it more probable that you will start to present with the signs of poor mental health. Okay, so usually the first thing on everybody's tongue here is excessive consumption of alcohol. Yeah, that would definitely be one. You could even have substance misuse. You could even have actually just burying your head in the sand and almost acting as if the problem isn't there and hoping it would go away, ignoring the problem. You could have an unhealthy relationship with work. Some people throw themselves into work or even the gym, again, as a distraction from actually dealing with the problem. You've also got the type of people that you speak to as well as an unhelpful coping strategy. Now, on the face of it, the type of people that we speak to, or let's just say offloading when we're stressed out, let's say, is a good thing on the face of it, right? But actually, it depends on the type of person and also the type of stress that you're dealing with. Because actually, and I use this as an example all of the time, let me know in the comments section, please let me know in the comment section if there is somebody that you know either now or somebody that you've known previously that every time you speak to them, somehow you are left with less energy than when you started the conversation, right? Let me know in the comments section, because I'm sure you've got a name for these people. Maybe it's a mood hoover, a neg ferret, or a radiator, because they drain the life out of you or the energy out of you. The point is that if you are already stressed out, that can be a poor coping strategy to talk to people like that. Okay, so it's really important that we are aware of our poor coping strategies. And also our good coping strategies, so that we can make more informed choices to focus on the ones that are going to help us relieve our stress container, prevent it from overflowing, and maintain our ability to adapt to stressful situations. So that's kind of homeostasis, AlEstasis, and I guess the process of us maintaining it through adapting to gradual changes in our environment. Now, what I wanted to get into was the systematic review that I mentioned earlier. So specifically answering the question, actually, what is the impact of exercise on mental health? And more specifically, not just what, but how does it impact our mental health? Okay, because how or what is nothing without how, in my opinion. So how exercise protects mental health? That is the question that we're answering just now. And to answer it, I want to share this with you. Now, it's not a long review, but I'm not going to kind of read the whole thing with you. I have gone ahead in my own notes and highlighted the most important parts, but it's actually available. It's an open review. It's available from the British Medical Journal. So this review is a systematic review and network meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials. So it's basically the highest level of clinical evidence that we can get. And it was designed to identify the optimal dose and also modality of exercise for treating people with major depressive disorder compared with things like psychotherapy, antidepressants, and other control conditions. And this was published, as you can see here, in the British Medical Journal, literally 3 or 4 months ago, back in January 2024. So this is the most kind of recent high level and up-to-date research that we have on the subject matter. And I guess just to put this in context, major depressive disorder is a leading cause of disability worldwide. Make no mistakes. It's been found to lower life satisfaction more than debt or divorce. It also exacerbates comorbidities, including heart disease, anxiety, and cancer. And the reason why we're asking this question, or one of the reasons why this question was asked, and they've attempted to answer it during this review, is that, you know, clinical practice guidelines in countries such as the US, UK, and also out in Australia recommend physical activity as part of treatment for depression. They do that, but they do not, as of yet, provide clear and consistent recommendations about the amount or type of exercise. Also, previous attempts at meta-analysis aimed at answering the same question pulled heterogeneous treatments, so meaning different treatments, and also different comparisons, which led to ambiguous effect estimates. Because the treatments that they were looking at and the comparisons that they were looking at were so different and came from different sources and different people, the control conditions weren't there, which means it was very hard to have a discerning, informed opinion on what the effects of exercise were. So the reason why this review is important is because this review only used data from randomized controlled trials and for randomized controlled trials on exercise for depression specifically. It also explored whether recommendations for exercise and the effects on depression differ based on a participant's gender, age, and also their baseline level of depression, because obviously it's not a one size fits all. So in terms of the results, exercise, as you're probably aware, was indeed shown to have moderate effects on depression, either alone or in combination with other established treatments, such as cognitive behavioral therapy. And in terms of the type of exercise, walking and jogging were seen to be jointly effective for both men and women. Yoga was somewhat more effective for older adults, and strength training was more effective for younger adults. And I forgot to mention here as well, you won't see this on the screen, but in terms of the source of all of the data, so it was actually over 200 studies that they pulled together to basically extract this data from, which came from, included in these studies was over 14,000 people from around the world, by the way. So it's quite a large data set that they've used to come to these conclusions. So, like I say, exercise was indeed shown to have moderate effects on depression, either alone or in combination with other established treatments such as CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, as well as antidepressants. So we know which exercises reduce depressive symptoms. And again, this review goes into more detail. I'm going to leave a link. I'm going to leave a pinned comment in the live stream on the YouTube channel if you want to go and check that out afterwards. But how did it do it? Okay, so we know which exercises reduce depressive symptoms, but how did it do it? Because like I say, I led off this section by saying what is nothing without how, right? So how did it do it? Well, although the review stopped short of highlighting any single mechanism that explains all of the findings, the data shows that social interaction, immersion in green spaces, and also mindfulness alongside increased self-efficacy were all associated with decreases in depressive symptoms. However, what was interesting is that no single treatment covers all mechanisms. So case in point, something like running may satisfy 3 out of the 4 things that you see on the screen here. So you could go running in green spaces, you may do it in a group, and it's going to increase your self-efficacy, because it's going to increase your self-efficacy. However, at the same time, it's unlikely to promote the self-awareness and mindfulness. It's unlikely to promote to the same degree the self-awareness and mindfulness that is provided by yoga and something like Qigong, for example. Both of which, by the way, are often practiced in groups. So you get the social interaction with yoga and Qigong, but at the same time, seldom have fast and objective feedback loops that improve self-efficacy like with strength training. So, yeah, like I say, no single mechanism necessarily explains all of the findings from this previous review. The other thing of note here is that what they put in the review is that the level of autonomy that was granted when exercise was prescribed for depressive symptoms also served as a predictor of effects, but in the opposite direction. Okay, so that is to say that the more autonomy that people had when they were prescribed exercise for their depressive symptoms, it was actually associated with weaker effects of exercise on depression. And the review itself goes on to say that, well, it goes on to suggest that one possible explanation for this is that when provided with more freedom, the low self-motivation that is symptomatic of depression may stop patients from setting appropriate levels of challenge. So, for example, they may be less likely to choose vigorous exercise and extract less of a benefit as a result. So, Yeah, there was also evidence to suggest that exercise increases the effects of selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs. So something like sertraline, for example, is a common antidepressant. And so offering exercise as an adjuvant, as an addition for those already taking antidepressants could also be a route for more discerning prescriptions of exercise for depressive symptoms. So yeah, that review, I found that quite interesting. It's one that you'd want to kind of take in and read in your own time, but that was the top and tail of it. And off the back of that, what I'd like to do now is talk about a book that I've been reading. I finished it last month or earlier this month, actually. It took me a while, but that's just because there's just so much value to be extracted from it. So it's called The Body Keeps the Score. And again, if you were kind of privy to the last live stream, I did mention it then, but actually I kind of mentioned it surface level. I didn't really go into any detail about what I kind of took from it, and specifically how it applied in this case to why movement, is so important to your mental health. So a bit of a backstory to this book, as you can see the bullet points there. So I'll just kind of run through this quickly. It was published back in 2015 by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, and he's one of the world's foremost experts on traumatic stress. So trigger warning to anybody that, does kind of, have a look into this book. It contains descriptive anecdotes of survivors of abuse and combat, which may be triggering for some people and also other survivors. Just a warning there. But off the back of that, The Body Keeps the Score draws on 30 years of experience and makes the case for a new paradigm of treatment, which moves away from standard talking and drug therapies that kind of fix how people present in terms of symptoms, and also towards alternative approaches that address the cause while healing mind, body, and brain in the process. So some of the alternative kind of approaches mentioned near the back end of the book, just as an example, include internal family systems, which recognizes that the mind is a mosaic and that as a defense mechanism, based on exposure to traumatic experience, certain aspects of the mind and of the self will become more prominent than others. Internal family systems, as I understood it, focuses on getting the more pronounced aspects of the mind to take a step back so that the parts that are being protected can come forward and begin to heal. Okay. There's also something called neurofeedback, which utilizes electronic signals of the brain to create a positive feedback loop and create new neural pathways that strengthen the brain's capacity to operate in wave ranges that are more conducive to healing and not feeling under threat. Another one that I thought was really interesting is EDMR, it mentions in here. So, and that leverages the principle of rapid eye movement to help people access painful memories without being hijacked by them, so that they can create hijacked by them so that they can reintegrate an experience. So chapter 4 very specifically talks about self-regulation and the options that we have available to us to control our response to stress and manage our emotions better. So top-down regulation involves strengthening the capacity of the prefrontal cortex, also known as the rational brain, to monitor your body's sensations. And this can be done through practicing things like mindfulness, talking therapies, and also meditation. Bottom-up regulation, however, involves recalibrating the autonomic nervous system through a combination of breathing, movement, and touch, such as in the practice of yoga. And chapter 16 then kind of actually doubles down on this and starts talking about the reintegrative benefits of combining movement and breathing in the practice of yoga, specifically in relation to its effects on heart rate variability, or HRV as it's known. So what is HRV? HRV is the relative balance between the two branches of your autonomic nervous system. So when we inhale, we stimulate our sympathetic nervous system, which increases our heart rate. On the other hand, when we exhale, we stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, which slows the heart rate down. So in healthy individuals, inhalations and exhalations produce steady rhythmical fluctuations in heart rate. Hence, Good heart rate variability is a measure of basic well-being. So the benefit to that is that when our autonomic nervous system is well balanced, we have a reasonable degree of control over our responses when our experiences fail to meet expectation. We can get through that process of AlEstasis, adapting to gradual changes in our environment much easier. We can calmly assess what's going on without feeling insulted or left out. We are more resilient. Okay. However, individuals with a poorly modulated autonomic nervous system, such as trauma survivors, which is what the book focuses on, or those of us under higher and persistent amounts of allostatic load, such as in the workplace, are more vulnerable to being thrown off balance, both mentally and physically. Okay. And so since the autonomic nervous system is responsible for how stress is handled both in body and brain, poor HRV, or essentially what we're talking about, is a lack of fluctuation in heart rate in response to breathing, not only has a negative effect on our thoughts and our feelings, but also on how the body responds to stress. And so the chapter that I'm talking about, chapter 16, goes on to highlight the results of case studies that confirm that changing the way you breathe, such as changing the way that you breathe and move, such as in the practice of yoga, has been proven to reduce anxiety, lower secretion of stress hormones, and also improve heart rate variability. Okay. So moving on swiftly. Are we moving on? Yeah, that's changed. Okay, so what have we spoken about? We've spoken about how the mind and body self-regulate and respond to stress. Okay, so we spoke about AlEstasis and also the importance of helpful coping strategies. Okay, we've also discussed how exercise has been proven to reduce depressive symptoms at the highest levels of research. Okay, and we've also spoken about just now how changing the way that we breathe can also have a positive impact on our mental health. And now to cap off, I'm going to share some quickfire tips on how you can move more for your mental health, different aspects of how you can move more for your mental health. And actually, I've got this matrix to kind of share with you. So I'm going to start off actually with, I'm not going to go in any particular order, but I'm going to start off with breathing because, again, with breathing, just relating it a bit more back to the workplace, there are lots of breathing exercises out there. A lot of some of the original ones come from, they're called what's called a pranayama, which is a Sanskrit practice, and it combines two words, prana and yama. So prana is life and yama means to regulate. So they combine together to mean controlled breathing. And even the practice of controlled breathing is really useful here, because when we are stressed out, when we are operating in a stressful environment, such as the workplace, our breathing becomes shallow. Okay, it becomes inefficient, and that means that there is an excess buildup of CO2 in the lungs, which makes us more susceptible to high blood pressure, cardiac heart disease, strokes, and some of the other morbidities that I mentioned earlier. So through practicing something like a pranayama or other breathing exercises, actually you can start to detoxify the lungs, kickstart the metabolism, fire up the synapses in the brain, improve your metabolism, think a bit clearer, and be less stressed out. Okay. And that's something that you can do. Again, pranayama, there's loads out there, but also loads of other. I think box breathing is another one as well. So I'm not going to tell you which one to do, but you can do your research. There's loads of YouTube videos with people that will show you how to do it. I'm just saying it's something that you can integrate quite quickly into your lifestyle, maybe 10 minutes in the morning before the start of the working day, to kind of get your mind right and keep you focused. So accountability is a big one as well. And what I mean by accountability is that if you are going to try and integrate movement into your lifestyle to improve your mental health, you want to do it in a way where you can do it consistently. And you can do it when times get hard, when you're not feeling the best version of yourself and you really are lacking the motivation. You're keeping yourself, you've got something that's kind of bigger than yourself to keep yourself accountable to the cause. Okay, so whether that's for me, just as an example, it really helps me to have things booked in. I have a financial investment in several running events that I'll be doing throughout the year. I've done several already, specifically half marathons in Exmoor a couple of weeks ago, the Mendip Hills before that, and then also the Jurassic Coast at the beginning of the year. That was tough. But the the point here is that when it came to training for these events and actually doing that physical activity, I was being held accountable, not only because I didn't want to, I wanted to struggle less. It was always going to be a challenge because, half marathons are hard, but if I could reduce the amount that I was going to struggle on the day, that's great. But also I got a financial investment in there. And also maybe I've told people about it, friends or family that can keep me accountable to the event. So that's really important. Look for different ways to keep yourself accountable. Tracking progress, really important as well. Really important that you've got a clear and set way to kind of tell tell the story of your experience to date, beginning, middle, and end. Because when we're stressed out, again, we can start to lose a sense of perspective, and that can make it even harder to stick to a routine if it's not clear on where we started, where we're at, and where we're trying to get to. Seeking inspiration as well. So seeking inspiration just really comes from, it's really the opposite of avoiding distractions that you can see on the left hand there. So when I say distractions, I'm talking about actually surrounding yourself with people that are kind of pulling in the same direction, right? This doesn't mean that you have to necessarily change your entire friendship group or whatever that might be, but just be aware that actually it's going to be a lot easier if you are around like-minded people. And then at the same time, when it comes to seeking inspiration, there's so much out there. In this kind of always on, ever connected world, it's generally labeled as a bad thing, but actually there are some benefits to it. And that means that you can seek out and tailor the type of inspiration that works for you. Some people like David Goggins, some people like that the other ex-Navy SEAL, Jocko Willink. There's so much out there, whether it's a podcast, whether it's music, whether it's a friend that has done something inspirational. You think, what, I'm gonna tap into that energy and do something very similar. Breathing, I mentioned already. Adaptability, or do you know what? I'll go with accessibility. So accessibility is really about making sure that whatever it is that you're going to choose to do in terms of keeping yourself active to improve your mental health, is that it's accessible more often than not. And so, for example, I like to do skydiving. I like skydiving. I like an adrenaline rush, and it moves, and believe it or not, it improves my mental health, helps me feel alive. Right, that's great. But it's not something I can do every time. It's expensive for one, and also I don't live next to an airfield. Right. Same thing if it was like quad biking or skiing. Living in the UK, I mean, a quad bike for one is expensive, but also skiing, we don't have anywhere really where we can ski regular here. So make sure that whatever it is that you want to kind of tap into, lean into activity-wise, it's something that is accessible more often than not. And if it isn't accessible for whatever reason, be sure that you have options with which you can adapt what you're doing. So that means that if, let's just say, going to the gym is something that you like to do, but for whatever reason you're on the road, or that there's a time or a place that you're going to be that actually doesn't lend itself to you sticking to that routine, then think of ways that you can adapt to it. Is there a different workout that you can do? Is there a different time of day that you can do what you need to do? Is there a different way that you can get the workout in? Can you take a pair of shoes with you so that you can just hit the road wherever you're at, if running is your thing, for example? Addition in the bottom left as well. I'd like to talk about that one because, again, as the review stated, you want to see exercise and movement as an addition to what you're already doing. So if you are experiencing mental health challenges, it's not to say that, okay, we need to, kind of chuck the baby out with the bathwater, to coin a phrase, because we know that actually, according to this review, exercise should be seen as an adjuvant, as an addition, because it actually aids the effect of antidepressants and also cognitive behavioral therapies. So if you're doing that already, that's great. It's not a one size fits all or a binary thing. That all three can exist in the same routine, and you can get the benefits of all three, is what I'm trying to say. And what else we got here? Small steps. So you don't eat an elephant all at once or at all, probably. And it's just a case of being true to yourself in terms of where you're starting and where you're trying to get to. For example, with myself, I mentioned I run half marathons most weeks in the mountains and in the hills, and that's what I do now. But sort of 5 or 6 years ago, I wasn't able to run sort of 800 meters around a pond at a place called Cannon Hill Park in Birmingham, if you're familiar with it. So Small steps. Everybody starts somewhere. And speaking of which, just start. Whatever it is that you want to do, whatever it is that you're thinking about, just start. And again, linking back to the small steps, you know, it could start with getting a massage on a weekly basis, because that helps as well. It could start with just making sure that you're going for a walk on a regular basis. But then the point is just start, because if you're waiting for the new pair of shoes, for a new pair of gym gear, if you're waiting for your friends to be ready to do it with you, or whatever it might be, whatever external factor it is that you're waiting for, forget about it, because ultimately the only person that's going to benefit from doing the exercise is you. So you want to limit the amount of external factors that are influencing you starting, and actually just start. Don't wait till you're ready. Start. And that's what I've got to say about that. So those are kind of 12 tips on how to move more for your mental health. And just as we kind of land the plane on this session, there's a couple of things that I wanted to mention. Long story short, I'm going to be putting the link to the Body Keeps the Score. If you want to check that out in more detail, I'm going to do a pinned comment in the comment section of this live stream, and also a link for the review, the systematic review that I mentioned. You can download that. It's open access from the British Medical Journal. And last but not least, if you've got value from this stream and want more content that is dedicated to helping you as a business leader, manager, or employee make conversations about mental health, well-being, and inclusion more accessible in the workplace and beyond, then I encourage you to subscribe to the Let's Go Wellbeing YouTube channel. Until then, my name's Matt Balfour. This has been How to Move More for Your Mental Health, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks for watching.